The Sylvaneth have been a much anticipated release, particularly for me as a lore junkie. And that statement stands for all of these factions getting a second book, the rewritten battletomes. Because AOS introduced us to a colorful cast of armies. But many of them originally existed very much in isolation, right? The Flesh Eater Courts, they had a few stories of them interacting with other armies, of course, but they were not big players in the grand lore. And so something could affect one army that just wouldn't affect the other, and they kind of fell behind the curve a little bit, kind of fell out of step with staying up to date with what's going on in the story arc. But that all changed with the Necroquake, this grand unifying event that delivers a definitive before and after effect for every single army. That is to say, everyone universally was affected by this event, and so everyone now has updated lore as they try to come to grips with what's happening around them. Now, I've already done a very in-depth Sylvaneth lore week. I covered all the previously existing units, the idea of the Spirit Song, of Alariel. So this video is really going to focus on the new lore, things that were added since the Necroquake, and in another video I'll go into the various war groves and all the stuff that was fleshed out there. So let's talk about the changes and updates to the lore with rewrites and things like that. And this is mainly for folks coming into the faction brand new. The book does an excellent job of making Alariel even more of a central character. She just matters more in all the various smaller stories. The recap of the history of the Sylvaneth is far more complete and flavorful. It takes them from the Age of Myth through the Age of Chaos and their actions in the Realmgate Wars. Again, it's a total summation of all the things we've seen of them. And they do it fantastic. I really do think it's a testament to the fact that Games Workshop is getting better writers when it comes to battletome lore specifically. And just kind of their understanding of the AOS universe as a whole. It's much more concrete now. Because with the Fireslayer book, I can tell you the overall writing quality, the stories are less out there, kind of crazy fantasy. They reined it in a bit. The characters matter more. Their internal logic and their values are way more present, which is very important to making them seem grounded. And when we left Alariel in the Realmgate Wars, for the most part, she's made cameos here and there, but for the most part, the story of the Sylvaneth kind of teetered off towards the end of the Realmgate Wars, and she was rejoining the pantheon of good gods, quote-unquote good, leading campaigns against chaos, mainly in Guerrilla, but she did branch out and pick a fight in Axia at one point. The Sylvaneth as a species were now on the offensive, making progress and bringing vibrant life back to the realms. And that's kind of the state they've been in for the last year or so, right? Showing up in lore bits as allies of convenience for Order factions, but generally being much more unified now that Alariel has kind of taken the helm of the army again. But all of that changed, right? That forward momentum changed with the Necroquake, the failed spell of Nagash that he thought would give him total dominion over the realms, instead launched a shockwave of magic outward, permeating every realm in the energies of death. For a fuller description of that event, of what happened with the spell, go check out my Soul Wars video and I'll put a link to it down below. And with all of these factions that are getting these updated books, the Necroquake acts as this pivotal moment in every army's history. There's a pre and a post Necroquake, like I said. So as we explore this army, right, talk about lore updates, how did this realm-wide event affect the Sylvaneth? Well, honestly, they were hit harder than most. If you watched my full series on the Sylvaneth, you'll know about the Spirit Song and also Realm Roots. To put it super briefly, the Spirit Song is this tune, this musical tune that's carried on the winds that binds all Sylvaneth. There's local ones, that's the Song of Your War Grove, and then there's ones that cast far and wide, binding all of the Sylvaneth together, like the Song of the Species. You can kind of think of the Spirit Song in another way, almost like a radio frequency that lets them coordinate, commune, and share experiences over vast amounts of distance. There's a lot of spiritual and emotional aspects to it as well. It's more than just a radio frequency. That Spirit Song can become a dirge, and the race as a collective entity will go into mourning, and it can be a rising crescendo that gets them all amped up for war. This was super well documented when Alariel was reborn in her war aspect towards the end of the Realmgate Wars. The Realm Roots help kind of carry that Spirit Song far and wide across the realms. So think of them as radio towers that are broadcasting that signal. Now, the reason I wanted to spend time talking about the importance of the Spirit Song in a setting that doesn't have technology that we very much know of, the ability to coordinate attacks and armies is a massive advantage. We saw this with the advent of battlefield radios in our own world. All of a sudden, the ability to communicate what is happening in the field, right on the battleground itself, becomes the most dangerous weapon for smart generals. It is kind of the core strategic advantage of the Sylvaneth, that they can have wargroves that are hundreds of miles apart, conduct attacks and counterattacks and feigning maneuvers and lead people into traps and do it all in perfect synchronization. Why? Because they're communicating constantly against enemies that don't have the bigger picture. I mean, they have other, advantages as well, as like camouflage and blending into nature and that kind of stuff. And it's all very important. But this is the big one, right? Their armies are hyper-focused and precisely coordinated and synchronized. And it's because of the Spirit Song that binds them, that allows them to communicate. It's not quite a hive mind. It's just excellent communication. Near perfect communication. Now, the reason I go through all that is because the Necroquake rips that away from them. The picture I've been using to kind of, describe this magical thing is radio. And when the Necroquake hits, it's like all radio station communication stops and it's replaced with this blaring screech. The waves of death energy block, break up, and sever all but the closest listeners of the Spirit Song. And so you can, understand the people who are with you, who are standing right next to you. You can communicate with them easily. But if your little set of troops walked away too far from your wargrove, you have lost all communication with home. As far as you know, you are the only Sylvaneth left in existence. Conceptually, they understand the others are still there, but in terms of communication, it's all severed. You're severed from your kin that are just kind of walked too far away. You're severed from other wargroves in that realm, and you're severed, this is most important, from your god, right? Sylvaneth all listen to the Spirit Song of Alarielle, and all of a sudden they cannot hear her. They are functionally, whether alone, isolated, or in a group, alone and adrift, just like the rest of your kind. To the Sylvaneth that use the Spirit Song as this harmonious tune that binds them together, it's like your brain can't tell your arm what to do all of a sudden. Things kind of just stop happening. Coordinated flanking attacks become easily picked off warbands, right? Then things fall apart very quickly. Few armies have felt such a blow to their very nature of who they are from the Necroquake as the Sylvaneth have. And things are extremely dire because of that. They don't boast the biggest numbers. Again, they use what they have to their advantage. The coordinated attacks, the guerrilla warfare basically is how we would call it. And things have been going really, really well, but when you shut down communication, it all becomes nothing. Well, at this point, of course, all eyes turn to Alarielle. How do you handle something like this? Her Spirit Song is the loudest, but you can't be everywhere, sharing her song and coordinating things. That's the same problem that Archaon has. He can't be everywhere. And that's the same problem that the Sylvaneth were taking advantage of, that they can coordinate in great distances, but Archaon can only be one place. All of a sudden, those playing fields get leveled really, really quickly. And so thinking deep and kind of taking a page from Sigmar's book, Alarielle designs a new living weapon. Where Sigmar used mortals and lightning, Alarielle uses the forest spites, those little ethereal creatures, little bug creatures, and soul pods of the Sylvaneth, forging them together with her god-like power from the realm of life. And thus, the Arch Revenants were born. Now, this is the newest model to hit the Sylvaneth army, showing up in the Loon Curse box. And just like the Arch Regents for the Flesh Eater Courts, one of their leaders that showed up in a dual set as well, they represent a direct response to the escalation in danger. Now, on the surface, it looks like just another soldier, somewhere between a Dryad and a Kurnoth Hunter, but it does some incredibly important things for the Sylvaneth that, lore-wise, like I said, a direct response to what's happening. First off, it can fly, and when communication radio has been shut down, the next best thing is having a flying messenger who can move fast from one group to another. It's a minor thing, but it's actually really important. Next up, they carry the direct authority of the Everqueen. When they show up, their word is law. Before this, if two wargroves were to like bump into each other in the wild, right, their spirit songs haven't been communicating, this isn't coordinated, they're going to start bickering about who has authority, what should we do, who's in charge. Again, they've kind of been operating in like harmony and synchronization, and that was pulled away from them. Well, what's nice is when this guy shows up, he is the word of the law. And when it comes to disorganization, you know, across like a global scale, a touch of authority goes a long way. But by far the most important thing they do is they break up whatever noise or death energies the Necroquake is causing. They act, again, like these little radio towers, if we're going to go with that analogy, for the spirit song. If there's an arch-revenant in your area of the realm, suddenly all the minor wargroves and the groups of Sylvaneth around can communicate again. Not on the same scale, realm-wide as before, but enough to coordinate these attacks, counterattacks, defensive measures, regroup, kind of assess what we have left as a species in this area, and that kind of thing. Lastly, the Sylvaneth standing near the arch-revenant, they fight harder, right? They fight like they're empowered, almost the same way as if they were standing in the presence of Alarielle herself. And really, that's what the faction needed at this point lore-wise. How can we take the impact of this one character, even a god, and multiply it? Well, she did it kind of the same way that Sigmar did, right? You infuse your power into a group of heralds. It makes her will known, and then you gift this power to the various wargroves with the ability to make that will a reality. And that's where the book leaves the Sylvaneth in this position, right? They've done for so many of the rewritten battletomes. The Necroquake had massive implications for them. They then took that and responded to it. They went on the back foot for a bit and then have responded to it. And they're taking the fight back to Shyish and Chaos. But why is that cool? I like to ask that at the end of every one of these videos, and I love it when the good guy takes a punch, right? Empire strikes back kind of moment, and this was a big one. Again, their main strategic advantage, and really more than just a military application, but just a part of who they are, how they communicate, how they understand the world is through the spirit song, and that got ripped away in an instant. It really put Alarielle and her faction on the back foot. But in that, we get to see how they respond to conflict, right? The Arch-Revenant fix, quote-unquote fix, it was just a patch. Death magic still hinder the spirit song, but it's an edge, and it's one that they're kind of working with the best that they can do. And so for that, you get these moments of heroism when the Arch-Revenant's trying to move to different areas to get all of his people he can together to distribute the will of Alarielle and make this happen, but on a grander scale. And I love that stuff. I love when, they're always going to be releasing new models and they have to keep finding ways to include them in books. But when they go out of their way like this, I love when there's a direct response to what's happening in kind of the grand lore going on. And the idea of I'm going to make a hero that acts as my will and it kind of exudes our spiritual and very practical thing that our faction needs across the battlefields, which is what he does. I mean, that's exactly what he does with the spirit song. I love that stuff. There's a reason for him being there. And if it wasn't him, it'd be somebody else. But, models will get released later on, and that's fine too. But I love when they have a good reason to introduce something new and that's exciting and it's engaging with the story. Now, the individual unit lore besides the Arch-Revenant remains almost completely unchanged. So if you want to learn all about them, check out the rest of my Sylvaneth series down below. As I said, I will at some point come back and do the lore for the new wargroves. There isn't a ton. They didn't add a bunch of information regarding the various ones, but I'll cover what there is and we'll kind of revisit that. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you all so much for joining me. I know things have been a little bit rocky because I'm kind of in this weird nebulous area waiting for a war cry, and I'm very excited for the content coming out there, but I will continue to deliver Age of Sigmar lore for everyone. So thank you all so much for watching, and happy wargaming.